I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. New Brunswickers will head to the polls on October 21st for the next provincial election. Here to tell us all about it and what you need to know before you vote is the Chief Electoral Officer of New Brunswick, Kim Poffenroth. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Vicki.
Last time you were here, we were doing a provincial election in 2020, so in the height of the pandemic, it was a snap election. You made history being the first person to have to navigate that uncharted territory. But now we're in a different time where Facebook, there's no news, it's been blocked. We're navigating a different era in the information age. What are the biggest challenges for you in your role when you're trying to keep the integrity of the election?
It's really about ensuring that New Brunswickers have confidence in the electoral processes, that they understand them, and combating that misinformation that may be out there. We've had the luxury for this election of having 4 years to prepare, knowing when the date was going to be, even though there was a bit of talk around this time last year of a possible election, so we geared up our preparations even more. So it's been definitely a smoother start to the election period than it would have been 4 years ago, just because of that, ability to prepare. But in terms of combating misinformation and ensuring New Brunswickers understand how the electoral process works, one of the things we've done at Elections New Brunswick is prepare a number of informational videos. We've done 5 so far. They should be available on various social media platforms, different digital platforms, Connect TV, these sorts of things. They really explain the electoral process, provide information to electors both about the eligibility criteria to vote, how to get on the voters list, the different methods of voting available. So that's a project we've undertaken that we're really excited about.
When it comes to a place like Facebook, though, where New Brunswickers tend to go every day to congregate, to comment on things, to read things, but we're not necessarily seeing information come out of news sources anymore, how do you ensure that people are getting information that's verified and correct, or how can they make sure that what they're reading is true?
Right. Well, that's a really important point, is that people need to take a little bit of responsibility on themselves and not necessarily assume that everything they're reading on social media or anywhere for that matter is factual. Go to trusted sources to verify information, and just double check, do a little investigation on yourself. If something seems different than what you've read before or seen, or it seems a little, I'll say, extreme or unusual, do a little bit of research yourself before you share that information, because what the research has shown is that people tend to believe information that's shared by people they know. So they assume that wherever that source came from, that they knew that there was some factual basis to it. So it's important before you do that sort of thing to share it to your wider audience that you verify that there's some truth to it. And in addition to our informational videos we've prepared, we've relaunched a campaign we did during the 2018 election, which is basically reminding people to verify information before you share it. So it's just educating the public on, that there's misinformation, disinformation, just ensure the accuracy. There has to be a little bit of responsibility on individuals to make sure that they're not spreading information that it could be inaccurate. It may be, accidentally inaccurate. Just because something isn't correct doesn't necessarily mean that somebody had a nefarious purpose behind spreading it. It just may have been they didn't understand. And it's important to go to trusted sources. So that's one of the things we're trying to reinforce with New Brunswickers, that particularly when it comes to election information, the how, the when, the what, the why, Elections New Brunswick is that trusted source. And if you're not sure that something you're seeing, you're reading, you're hearing about elections is accurate, go to the electionsnb.ca website and do a little research. And if you're still not certain, give us a call. We're happy to. We have a call center open, 1-888-858-VOTE, and we have a call center available that can answer some questions for people.
A growing global concern for really all elections around the world is this idea of foreign interference. Is that something that we look out for in New Brunswick, should be concerned with?
It's not something that we've seen as a particular trend in New Brunswick, but our campaign around educating the public on our processes, because that's where a lot of the foreign interference is really about misinformation and disinformation and trying to mislead voters about perhaps what the issues are and that sort of thing. So ensuring that the public knows what the processes are in New Brunswick and where to find out that information, and being aware that there's all kinds of potential actors that are trying to influence their patterns, their voting, whether they even vote at all. That's what some of the foreign interference is about, is about dissuading people from voting. So being aware that that is out there and to double check sources. And of course, our actual processes, our IT systems are all protected by very robust IT infrastructure, that we do have the assistance of the government of New Brunswick with protecting our IT infrastructure.
And how do those, I know one of your videos does talk about the tabulation machines and how they work, and obviously around the world too, people don't always trust election results now. So part of your information tour is really shedding light on how votes are counted. And I'd love for you to shed light on that right now.
Yeah, so it's very simple. The tabulation machines count the paper ballots. So some people think the tabulation machines are vote counting or are voting machines. The machines don't vote for you. You vote on a paper ballot, you mark your ballot, all of those paper ballots are retained. And the tabulation machines just basically work like a scanner at the grocery store. It's a very simple technology. It, in addition to counting, it also takes a picture of the ballot. So if we need to go back and look, we can verify that how the ballot was counted if there's been some issue. And then those results, the tabulation machines are not connected to the internet throughout the day. They're tested before they go out. We go through every single tabulation machine that's used in the province, which at this election will be somewhere between 700 and 800 of those. Every single one of those machines is tested at Elections New Brunswick headquarters to make sure it reads all of the ballots that machine may count. So if it's the St. Croix riding, the machines that are going out to the polling stations in this area, every single one of those will have every potential ballot that could be marked. So for each candidate, overvotes, undervotes, all of those are tested, and we make sure that it's counting correctly, that it's recording those votes, and then we seal them up. All the ports are sealed, and they're put in sealed, and we keep a record of all the information. And then when those arrive with our returning officers, they do the same process to make sure all the seals are intact, that all the machines add up. And then at the end of the night, on election night, we connect a modem. The results are sent to headquarters in Fredericton, and we have software that then validates to ensure that they're valid results, that they haven't been corrupted in any way, and then we publish those to our website. And something we do after the fact in every single riding in the province, the morning after the election, we have our returning officers do a hand count on one ballot box, just to verify that the results that were transmitted to us on election night are the same. And it's just an audit process. And then what we also do, in addition to all of that, before the results are finalized, because those results that are published on election night, those are unofficial results. Right. We actually have our returning officers. So with the tabulation machines, they print off a long paper tape that shows all of the vote tallies for each candidate. And what they do with that is they make sure that the results that were transmitted to us on election night are the same as the results that are on those tapes that are printed from the machines before they're even connected with a modem. So before they're connected to the internet, we print off that tape. And so that's something else they do the morning after the election, is to verify, to make sure all of those results are correct. And to date, every time we've used tabulation machines in New Brunswick, all of those processes have ended up with no errors. So we have a lot of processes in place to ensure that people can feel comfortable that the results are correct. We verify those, and then we maintain the paper ballots for a full year. And those are also available for judicial recounts.
Okay, because we are expecting a close election, and sometimes in ridings it can come down to just a matter of a few votes. What happens in a case like that where maybe it's so close that you'd want to do a recount?
Right, so that's up to any elector in a riding can make an application to the court for a judicial recount. There's three bases on which they can make that application. The first is closeness of the vote. So if there are a difference of 25 votes or less between the winning candidate and any other candidate on the ballot, then a judge will automatically grant. The application still has to be made to the court for the recount, but if it is because of that closeness of 25 votes or less, the judge will grant the recount, and then it's a hand count by a judge in front of witnesses, including the candidates, of every single ballot cast in that electoral district. So that's can be quite a process. And then there's if there's a belief that there was a error in counting the ballots, or if there was some alleged error by election officials, an application can be made on those bases as well, and then the judge will look at the application made to the court and decide whether or not they're going to go ahead with judicial recount. For the most part, the judicial recounts historically have been based on the closeness of the vote.
Oh, exciting. And do mailed-in voting, does that factor in too? Could a mailed-in vote come in later?
All mail-in ballots have to be in by the close of polls on election night. So they have to be in by 8 p.m. on October 21st in order to count.
Okay, so if you are mailing in, is there a time at which it would be too late?
Well, there's nothing in our legislation that there's a cutoff. If you can get it back to the returning office that issued the ballot, so all of the mail-in ballots are issued through your individual returning office, as long as you can get it back to that office before 8 p.m. We've had people hand deliver on behalf of, if they have a relative or a friend that's homebound and did receive a mail-in ballot, they can have that friend or family member hand deliver it back to the office. I mean, we do have, when it gets quite close, and if it's a mail-in ballot that's going quite a distance, we do let people know, we will send it to you, but if you can't get it back here by 8 p.m. on October 21st, on this case, it's not going to be counted. So they know, we give everyone the opportunity, but it's once the ballot, and we send them out by courier, either Purelator or Priority, depending on where they're going, so that we can get them out as soon as possible. But the responsibility is on the voter to get it back to the returning office, and they'll have a self-addressed envelope, that sort of thing, to send it back in.
And I do want to get to all the different ways that people can vote, but while we were on the topic of mail, I did want to bring up the flyer that came out recently by Life Coalition. There was some concern by New Brunswickers that this is some form of election interference, especially with some people thinking it targets a marginalized group. Can you talk a little bit about whether this sort of thing is allowed and how it works?
Right. So before the writs were issued on Thursday, September 19th, there really are no rules around election-related advertising for what we refer to as third parties. So a third party is basically any person, group, or corporation who isn't a political party or a candidate. And they can do whatever advertising they want. There may be other rules that aren't within elections in New Brunswick. We don't regulate or monitor content of messaging. And then once the writ is issued, so as of Thursday, September 19th, until Election Day on October 21st, anyone who wants to do any election advertising that is a third party has to follow certain rules. So if they're going to be spending $500 or more on their third party election advertising, they have to register with Elections New Brunswick. And there's also spending limits. So the spending limit for a third party province-wide is approximately $17,600 thereabouts, and in any single riding you can't spend any more than $1,760. And then even if you're not going to spend that $500 on election advertising and you're not required to register, you still have to identify yourself. Even if you're just Joe Blow putting up a lawn sign on your yard that's not a sign associated with one of the political parties, you have to identify yourself and who you are so that people know where the advertising is coming from.
Very interesting, especially as we're watching our election unfold in New Brunswick at the same time as the American election. It feels like their campaign season has been going on for a year. So there are these limits to our campaign season.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about ways to vote now? We talked a little bit about mailing in, but how does early voting work? How do people make sure they are eligible too?
Right. So we sent out at Elections New Brunswick, I believe it's 2 weeks ago now, to every registered voter that we have on our list a card asking people to verify their information. So if any of your viewers received one of those cards and the information on it isn't accurate, or there's somebody that is no longer residing at that residence, please call Elections New Brunswick, our call center again, 1-888-858-VOTE, to update that information. If you believe you're a registered voter and didn't receive one of those cards, once again, please call our call center and make sure that the information we have is up to date. Okay. And if you're not, you haven't voted in a previous New Brunswick election, then you can go to our website to download the form in order to be added to the list of electors. If you're not sure if you're already on our list of electors, the best thing to do is actually, once again, call our call center, 1-888-858-VOTE, to verify if you're on the list of electors. And then they can help you with the process to register. But there is a form that needs to be sent in with ID requirements. So if you're not a registered voter, you need to provide ID that has 3 pieces of information on it. We need your name, your signature, and your civic address, okay, so that we know where you can vote. If you have a New Brunswick driver's license, it's a great piece of identification to use because it has all of those. But you can use a combination of your Medicare card, a lease, a phone bill, any of these types of things that have that information. So that's about getting on the list and making sure our information is accurate, because we'll use that information that we're trying to get corrected now to send out the voter information cards on October 7th.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I was going to say we have 3 people at CHCO, our youngest staff, all turned 18 this year. So when it comes for first-time voters, new voters, who might be intimidated about the idea, did I do this right? How do they ensure that they are eligible?
I would simply go to our website and download the form. It's for application for addition to the list of electors. And just fill out the form, make a photocopy of that ID, and send it into Elections New Brunswick. If they believe they've already done that but they're still not sure, just call our call center. That's the best way, and they can double check and make sure that they're on the list and at the proper address. And I'm really excited for all of the new voters that we have in New Brunswick, whether they're new people that have moved to New Brunswick throughout the course of the last 4 years, and all of our new eligible electors. And it's important to know that you have to be 18, a Canadian citizen, and have lived in the province of New Brunswick for 40 days before Election Day.
I think when I moved home, I'm trying to remember what year that was, but I did vote pretty early into that. I had someone vouch for me, though, that I had been here 40 days. Does that make sense? There's all kinds of ways to ensure that you have the opportunity to vote.
Exactly, absolutely, because you can go in, if you want to register to vote and vote at the same time, one of the things you can do is go into your local returning office. Eligible voter can vote at any returning office in the province as of this Thursday, just passed, all through the election period right up until the polls close on October 21st. And you can actually register at the same time. So you can register, go into your local returning office, register and vote at the same time, or you can register as well when you go to vote.
Now, let's say you're away in a different area for school, or even working somewhere in a different part of the province. Can you vote in a different place that is the riding that you live in?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what the returning offices are open 6 days a week, Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then on Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And an eligible elector can go into any returning office in the province and vote for their home riding. So for example, if you have a student from St. Andrews who happens to be going to university in Fredericton, they can go into the local returning office. We're also this year, something that we weren't able to do in 2020 due to the pandemic, we are actually going to be having our campus voting program on university and college campuses across the province. And that will be going on the week before Election Day. So, and we're at various campuses. If voters want to know more about that, they once again can go to our website, electionsnb.ca. But we have a really good information campaign on a lot of those campuses to make it easier for students to vote.
Definitely the pandemic, as you mentioned, shook things up quite a bit, and you really did lead the charge, the first in Canada to navigate that. What will you be looking for? I'm sure it's interesting in terms of trends, whether post-pandemic we have some of the same voting habits. I know that a lot of people didn't want to vote election day, just in terms of spacing and not being in crowds. A lot of people did mail-in votes that time too. So what will you be looking for, just to see if certain things continue and if they change based on us not being in a pandemic this time around?
Yeah, so that's something I'm very curious to see what the trend will be. In 2020, we encouraged people to flatten the election curve and to spread out to vote at the returning offices, to vote at those advanced voting days. And a significant number of people voted by mail. It was 1,000 times increase. It was still only about 1.3% of voters voted by mail, which was significantly lower than BC that held an election shortly after ours. But I'm very curious to see what the trend is. Will people go back to their more traditional habits of voting on election day or at the 2 advanced voting days, or will they take advantage of the ease and convenience of voting at their local returning office at any day that's convenient for them? And we did find certain areas took up that opportunity to vote at returning offices more than others, just because some ridings are a lot smaller. Their returning office might have been in a very convenient location. So I'm curious to see how that trend, whether it continues or if people revert. There has been a general trend across Canada over the last decade for people to take advantage of advanced voting opportunities, because there's so many opportunities to make it convenient to vote. We really are doing whatever we can so that it's easy for people to vote. Mm-hmm. And there's really no excuse to not vote, that it was, I wasn't home, it wasn't convenient, it wasn't at a good time. We've got a lot of opportunities. As you said, we can do vote by mail for people who are homebound due to illness or some other infirmity. We can do home visits in those special circumstances. And then there's 3 days when you can go to the polls, plus the entire election period you can go into, as I said, any returning office. For example, in Fredericton, I know one of the returning offices is in King's Place. So I know a lot of people during 2020, they worked in the downtown core. It may not have been their riding, but it was easy. They went and got their Starbucks, then they went over to the returning office and voted. And that was one example of a returning office that was extremely busy. I remember visiting one in St. John, and they were just lined up constantly.
And we have a lot of there's 8 registered parties. I know St. Croix we have 6 candidates, but there's 8 parties for the province this time around.
Yes, we've had 3 new political parties register just over the course of the summer. So there are 8 registered political parties, and I know, looking at our website yesterday, there was at least 1 independent candidate in one of the ridings who had run. So we actually had to, during the summer, look at, okay, how do we have to adjust our ballot? Because using the tabulation machines, you can't just add extra names easily. So we had to look, okay, if we get into 8 or more candidates, how do we have to readjust the ballot in terms of font size and that sort of thing? So we've already done that, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, some of the newer parties may not have candidates in all of the ridings, but it will be interesting to see where they overlap and see which, I'm excited to see which riding has the most number of candidates on the ballot.
Maybe St. Croix. And speaking of ridings, people should be aware that sometimes those ridings do change. They change in size, sometimes in name. I'm looking at Fundy the Isles, which we used to know as Fundy the Isles St. John West, is now Fundy the Isles Laurinville. Tell us a little bit about where people can go to make sure they are looking at the right riding.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there are new ridings for this election. An independent commission drew those up, I think it was over a year ago now. And so a lot of the ridings in the province have changed either in their geography or their name. Some have stayed relatively the same, which St. Croix would be one of those ridings, but some have had a significant change. And so I do encourage voters to go to our website. On our landing page, there's a Where Do I Vote link. Just click on that link, type in your address, and it'll tell you what the name of the riding you're living in is. I believe we already have up the polling stations where you will vote for that individual, and where the returning office is. And I think it's really important for people to do that, because there may be that if there's a candidate you voted for in the last number of elections, that candidate may be running again, but they may not be running in your riding because of the boundary changes. And so I'm really encouraging people to do that. And I actually received a text. I made the same message on another radio show, and I received a text from an old friend that said, I'm really glad you mentioned that because I completely forgot that those had changed. And especially, I think, in some of the urban ridings, and there were some significant changes in the north of the province as well, but small shifts in lines in an urban riding in particular can make a huge difference as to what riding you're in. So it's important, in order to educate yourself on who the candidates are in your riding, that you make sure you know which riding is. And a lot of the names have changed, even if in some cases the boundaries haven't changed much.
Yeah, and that would be a symptom of population growth as well.
Exactly.
Again, we have less than a minute left. What are your final messages to New Brunswickers who are gearing up to vote?
Well, check and make sure that you are on the list of electors. If you've received that card in the last couple of weeks, all should be good. If you didn't receive one and thought you should, please contact our office and get out and vote. The health of a democracy is very much dependent on people voting. And, the politicians look at where their votes come from, and if there's certain demographics, whether it's age or areas, they may say, we don't have to be concerned about, that age group because they're not voting. So particularly for young voters, I really want them to keep that in mind, because that's where the policies end up being made, is by the politicians. And they know where the votes are coming from. And I want to remind people that they can vote at a returning office Monday through Saturday. Our advance voting days are October 12th and October 15th, which is a Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, advance voting is on a Saturday and a Monday, but this year the Monday falls on Thanksgiving. And your last opportunity to vote is October 21st.
Well, I appreciate so much you being on an information tour and also taking the time on that tour to make us stop here. It means so much to us.
Always happy to be here, Vicki.
My guest today has been the Chief Electoral Officer of New Brunswick, Kim Poffenroth. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.